This is No BS Job Search Advice Radio, episode 2450. I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome. Fridays, I normally release a longer form interview, but I decided to release instead a live stream I did with Marty Gilbert from North Shore Executive Networking Group, where we did a live Q&A that I've edited a little bit, so there isn't as much as the intro as existed for those watching on video live, or for that matter, as much of the outro as well. But the long and the short of it is, it's a really good interview with the two of us where we take live questions from people, starting off with me talking about the job market. Hope you enjoyed today's show. If you like it, please share it, give it a thumbs up, do something that lets people know it was worthwhile. Give No BS Job Search Advice Radio a positive review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen to the show. Make a point of giving it a great review. And now, let's get going.
So, Jeff, I'm going to turn this over to you because I think there are some folks here that are not familiar with you and your background and some of the resources that you can make available to them. So, please, Jeff Altman and I have known each other for some time now, and I thought he'd be a really nice partner on the experience today.
Thank you for the introduction. And folks, for those of you who don't know me, name is Jeff Altman. I was nicknamed the Big Game Hunter many years ago because I used to hunt down leaders in staff organizations. Did it for what felt like 100 years. It was, in point of fact, about 44, 45 years I did that. Filled more than 1,200 full-time positions plus consulting assignments. People hire me for no BS career advice. And that could be with a job search, hiring more effectively, management leadership, career transitions, dealing with workplace issues, because I have a broad expertise. On LinkedIn, you can connect with me, as you can see on screen, linkedin.com, I am the Big Game Hunter. My website, thebiggamehunter.us, has more than 12,000 searchable posts. You can watch, listen to, or read that will help you with the job search and some of those other categories. There's also my courses, books, and guides. And I've got a huge channel on YouTube at jobsearchtv.com. It's also available on Amazon if you have a Fire TV or a Fire Stick. If not, it's on 300 streaming services through bingenetworks.tv. And of course, No BS Job Search Advice Radio has been on air for it's almost 12 years now. More than 2,400 episodes at this point. So I've got a deep background in a person and their careers with a special emphasis on dealing with job search from a very practical standpoint.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Jeff. And it's the first time for me to have somebody as a guest on mine and my session, and I think it's only appropriate that I have Jeff be a part of that. So here's the rules. There are no rules, okay? Any job search related topic is open game, so please feel free to chat your questions in. I'm going to start first with a question. I got a bunch of questions that were emailed in, and there was, one here that I thought was a good starting place for us, and then we'll start going through the chatted questions. And so, Jeff, I'm going to direct this one to you. Where do you believe the job market is today?
Boy, let's start easy. It's complicated, and it's complicated because people don't understand the statistics that are available. For example, the first Friday of every month, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out the jobs report. And that last report was spectacular. 522 or 528,000 new jobs. And it didn't sit right with a lot of people. For example, LinkedIn's workforce study came out 2 or 3 days before and reported that it was down for the 4th consecutive month. New hires were down 4 consecutive months. And I started to dig into the government numbers, and I realized we all think of a job as being full-time. That's not what the government does. A job is a job is a job. Thus, if you're working part-time, that's a job to the government. If this is a second job because you're dealing with the economy, that's a job. If you're a camp counselor working this summer in a sleepaway camp, that's a full-time job. That's a job to them. And the problem is they don't discern that unless you dig into the numbers. So in point of fact, professional positions continue to decline. And as LinkedIn reports, because that's primarily a professional marketplace, it's down for the fourth consecutive month. And as I've been saying for a while, the music is slowing down on hiring. We are all seeing stories about, well, I don't know if you may have seen the most recent one. PricewaterhouseCoopers did a survey, and 93% of businesses believe they were either in a recession now or preparing for one over the next 12 to 18 months. There's a message in this, folks, and that is everything that you know to do about job search. This is the time to begin your process now as a way of protecting yourself.
Okay, good. All right. So now we've got some, at least some reference as to where the market is today. Here's a question that was chatted in here. It has to do with ageism. Okay. What to do. Okay. And so, I think we all agree that age discrimination against jobs. Yeah, we're both sitting here with faces. Age discrimination is alive and well. Okay. Particularly with people in a job search. And it's just so unfortunate. But there are some very practical things that you as a job seeker can do to help overcome some of those hurdles. Because some of the stereotypes that a lot of companies have about people that are over the age of 45 or 50, okay, and that bar keeps coming down, younger and younger. As the workforce continues to get younger and younger. Some of the things that you have to overcome is the stereotype that, he or she is getting older, she's slowing down. Okay, they're not quite as motivated. Maybe they get tired and don't have the energy level that they once had. And by the way, maybe they're just looking for a job that they can ride out for the next 5 or 6 years before they reach a point where they can go ahead and actually retire.
And they don't take direction well from people who are younger.
There you go. Okay, and which leads me to one of my suggestions to all of you. Okay. There's a good chance that one of you can be or will be, and maybe have been, working for a millennial. Okay, you could be working for someone that could be anywhere from 10 to 20 years younger than you. Now, there's the challenge that they have as to whether or not they're willing to accept you. There's the challenge that you have as to whether or not you think you can work for somebody that's much younger than you. But you've got to be able to show that you've got that energy level. And one of that, those issues has got to come through in the way that you interview. You've got to come through with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement. You also have to show that you're current with technology. There's nothing worse than applying for a job and having an AOL email address. Okay, I mean, that will absolutely crater your chances. Believe me, there are a lot of people that still have them. What does it do? It tells the recipient that you're old, you didn't keep current with technology, and you're sitting on an email address, whether it's AOL, Yahoo, Hotmail. These are email addresses that can really hurt your chances without you ever even knowing it. And of course, you want to be able to, to ride on the things that you've got that a younger job seeker doesn't have, and that's the experience. So your age and experience is both a blessing and a curse. But take advantage of the fact that one of your greatest assets are the achievements you have throughout your career. And you've got to really stress and get people understanding through your storytelling the things you've done in your past that are so pertinent to that job that they're trying to fill right now.
So true, Marty. And one of the things I also see is older professionals cop to ageism pretty quickly. And yeah. I say that because so often the issues are lack of preparedness for interviews. Hey, I can walk in, I've done this before, and it'll be no problem this time until it is. And my concern is always, and again, remember, I'm no BS career advice. So I'm looking at you folks square in the eye. If you've got a concern about ageism, the first thing is to look in the mirror and to ask yourself, was I really well prepared for the interview? Had I looked at the person's profile, examined the resume, matched up my job description with the resume for baseline matching and meshing between my background? Had I prepared stories in advance to talk about that would demonstrate my fit for this role? Or did I just kind of walk in and wing it? Professionals all practice, or if they're entertainers, they rehearse. But job hunters often go on interviews, and the first time the words ever come out of their mouth are at the interview. And then they wonder why they don't get the results that they want. So my reminder is start with the mirror, and then we can start to talking about ageism and the things that are on their side they do, because they do it, of course.
Yeah.
They absolutely have ageism built all over the system.
Yeah, and you can't do anything about it, right? Because you're not an employee of the company. But one of the great things about Zoom is that you can record it. And so have one person ask you a question, record the session, and see how you respond. Play it back. You're going to be really surprised at some of the things you do that may actually be hurting your chances because of the way you're describing your experience, your value, and of course, words like and and you like and you know. These are, if they appear time and time again in your answers, they make you come across as though you're not very confident. So, all right. So, Jeff, here's a question that's come in. I live in Indiana and I'm looking for remote work. How do I handle not having the practical experience for positions that I want compared to having too much education? So it's an interesting challenge.
Yeah. And if I'm understanding the question correctly, you've been in school or you've been teaching at a university, you're looking for something remote, private sector. And if I'm incorrect, please correct it in chat, and Marty will let me know and steer me. Okay. So the idea very simply is, where's the knowledge gap? Is there a knowledge gap? Do you have the right experience for the kind of work that you want to be doing? Now, from there, it's a question of identifying opportunities that actually fit you. If there is a knowledge gap, you've got to deal with it, because they're not in the business of hiring people who can't help them solve a problem. Their job is not to be nice. Their job is to solve a problem. So meet them where they are by solving any skills deficiency gaps you might have. From there, if it's a switch from the educational sector to private sector, once you have that gap fulfilled, depending upon your level of seniority, if you're relatively junior, it shouldn't be a problem, because they don't care as much as they do if you're looking for $150,000, $250,000, $350,000 a year. The more senior you are, the more they expect a square peg for a square hole. They're paying a premium price and they want what they want. So from there, the question comes down to, what can you do to meet them where they are? I always think about networking your way either to a relevant position or something in proximity to the relevant position, where once you're in the door and can impress them, you have the opportunity to finesse yourself over to the ideal role. So those are a couple of ideas that hopefully can help.
Yeah, and I think that the storytelling aspect of somebody who may feel that they're a bit deficient on the experience side of things, you've got to come up some way in which to connect, whether it is your experience or your education or aspects that you have a strong affinity to, and be able to to really communicate that strongly during an interview. Because there are people out there that look at an individual and see potential. You may not have that exact experience that we want today, but you've got the foundation and maybe some of the disciplines that they put a higher value on than with most people. And that can help get you over the hump.
Do you find that true with very senior people as well?
No, absolutely not. It's just the opposite. Okay. All right. And so let's talk about that, because that's an important element. As you move up the ladder, okay, in the experience, in the experience level, in the titles, one of the most important things when people are looking at you versus other candidates is what you've done in your past and what you've done specifically in many cases in their industry. Okay. And I tell a lot of people the easiest way to eliminate candidates who have, let's say, 10 or more years of experience is if they haven't worked in that industry. And I've got 3 or 4 other candidates over here who look similar, have similar experience, but they've worked in my industry. Because people will train you on their products and their technology and their services, But if they can get by with not having to train you on the industry up front, that means you can hit the ground running a lot quicker than somebody who's not coming from inside that environment.
There's so many little nuances that firms key in on during the interviews to see if there's a way that, because again, you're not the only person that they're talking to. They may be speaking to, let's pick a number, 10 people. So what are the tiebreakers? Assuming all of you have a baseline knowledge. Industry clearly is one.
Yeah. There's a quick question here. It's got an easy answer. What email address should I have? Because we were talking about things like AOL and whatnot. Gmail is the safest place to go. It is the email nomenclature of choice today, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. And avoid ones that have political connotations in either direction, because you annoy half the population as a result.
Okay. So here's a question. To maybe a clarification. What I meant is that I only have 6 months of HR experience, and I have a master's in HR. I think your answer and response addressed that assumption. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, as a junior person, they're less concerned.
Yeah. So one question here is any resources that you can recommend on improving networking skills?
Marty, I suspect you have a few.
Yeah, of course, I would recommend, for one thing, if you are not yet a member of the North Shore Executive Networking Group, that you become one, because it's a great place to refine and constantly work on them, because there's so many people in the organization here that you can be testing out your skills and learning from other people. Okay, you only get better at interviewing, at networking, at being able to, talk about your value by doing it more and more. And networking does not come natural to a lot of people. I realize that. It may make some people feel uncomfortable, but the sooner you get over that uncomfortable hump, you will start to get a lot more fluid and confident in the way you talk and network with people. And one piece of advice: never eliminate somebody because they don't carry a big title. You don't know who they live next door to, who they're friendly with, who they're related to. And some of the greatest introductions can come from people that don't carry a director, VP, or C-level title today, because everybody is connected to folks, many of which could lead to, some great potential interviews that open doors that you couldn't get on your own.
One of my favorite stories came from a networker. He really introduced me to the concept of networking. And John told me this story about someone who was on the phone talking to a recruiter, and this cleaning person walked by and said, "Could I get a copy of your resume?" And like most self-respecting guys, he went, "Yeah, sure. And a few weeks later, she comes back and same scenario. "Yeah, sure." And eventually his wife walks in and said, "Would you give her the resume?" She started to ask me for it. And as it turned out, his cleaning person was married to the president of a bank. And she did this to maintain humility. You never know who that person is who's going to provide the introduction. Yes, he got his job that way. In much the same way, another story I heard was about one barber in Charlotte, North Carolina, who the senior execs in the banks in Charlotte would all go to see. And you had to wait for him to ask you, which usually meant the second or the third haircut. For the resume, what do? Do you happen to have a resume with you? And then he would hand it to them, and people got jobs that way. You never know. And I also have some resources on my website, thebiggamehunter.us. They're tagged or in categories for networking and networking mistakes, or you could watch it on YouTube as well.
And just to build off of that, I do have an 1.5-hour webinar recording on how to network to your next job. So there's no end to tools, just between Jeff and I, quite honestly. And of course, there's a lot of things that are written out there that you can find as well. But I think one of the greatest detriments that people face when it comes to networking is they're holding themselves back. It's okay to reach out to people you don't know. It's okay to email people that are complete strangers to you, but you want to leverage your network. And I guess this kind of leads into the next chatted question that came in here. Let's see, it says, do Do you have any tips for navigating LinkedIn's algorithms to increase your exposure to recruiters and hiring teams? And this is such an important piece of a job search, because LinkedIn is the job search platform of choice. It's fantastic. Having a lot of LinkedIn connections has a tremendous advantage over people that are sitting on a small number. But one of the things you want to do when it comes to using LinkedIn is to be able to do filtered searches, because you can find people based by industry, by specific company, by title, and by geography, and combinations of those by simply using the filtered search capability within LinkedIn. And this is where, as a job seeker, if you work in the healthcare industry, just as an example, you can start to find all kinds of companies that are maybe in your local city or group of states. And if you're looking for people in finance and healthcare or marketing and healthcare in Indianapolis, in New York, in LA, you can find them all right on LinkedIn. You will find much more results if you have a lot more connections. And of course, those secondary connections are the people that you oftentimes want to get to. And so it's your first degree connections, and particularly if you have a lot of them, that can help make introductions into the people in those firms or in those industries where you want to make your presence known.
And to attract recruiters to you, what you have to do is to think like a recruiter. To do that, start off by understanding LinkedIn sells a product to them called LinkedIn Recruiter, which has all the same filters that Marty was talking about, plus it'll filter on the basis of seniority levels, education, university-specific firms. There's lots of different filters built into the product. So to be attractive to recruiters starts off with think like them. What do they want to know about you that could turn up in a search so that way they'd want to contact you? And if you're not sure, start shopping different job descriptions that you think would represent you well. Look for commonality of language and terms and start working that into your profile. The headline under your name is huge now. Make it very clear about your area of expertise. Do not use titles like Senior VP level 4 on the 3rd floor in the next to the basement by the elevator. You know what I mean, folks. Make it attractive. Great photo. Male or female, great photo. No wedding photos, folks. And looking at the camera, because believe it or not, one of the filters in the algorithm is eye contact on camera. So look at the camera as you speak, be friendly, and think like a recruiter. What do they want to know about you to figure out whether they should contact you?
All right, Jeff, here is a question that's been chatted in. I'm over 55 and have 30 years of senior positions in operations. How do I locate headhunters who can help? I've experienced a lot of age discrimination.
So it starts off with, are there headhunters who fill positions for the kind of work that you do? So there are lots of people who may have jobs open, and it may be a one-time scenario where they happen to have that. But it starts off with, who are those recruiters? Keyword search them. You'll find them on LinkedIn. Google's a great resource for that. In much the same way as they're trying to find them, you're trying to find them. Find you, you're trying to find them. And thus, what are the terms that you would use to identify a recruiter with your area of expertise? I'll also mention, don't always think of the large firms, whether it's Manpower or any other organization that's global in scope. Think of the smaller or regional players or the local firms as well, because often they're hungrier. They work harder. No disrespect to the big firms. They obviously cover a lot of territory, but smaller firms may advocate for you more. I know I used to be part of a network of recruiting firms that goes by the acronym NPA Global or NPA Worldwide. and they have members all over the world with areas of expertise. So start searching on LinkedIn, start searching on Google, go into groups on LinkedIn that are recruiter focused groups and start searching the members to see whether there are members there in that area of expertise. There's a few ideas for you.
Yeah. And the large, well-known executive search firms like Korn Ferry, Spencer Stewart, Russell Reynolds, just keep in mind, they represent less than 1% of all the jobs that are out there at any given point in time, because they're only going after C-level and VP roles. Keep in mind that their client is going to be paying 33% of that individual that they hire. They're going to be paying as a fee 33% of their first year's salary. So they can't afford to hire, these large executive search firms, for many jobs. But if you are interested in those kinds of roles, then you should be going onto their website and find out who is it that handles searches for manufacturing, for IT, for healthcare, for wireless, whatever industry, because there are industry practice leaders. And this is a good place for you to start to get in with some of these folks that might have a search that could be of interest to you or where you're well aligned.
I've got one for you, Marty.
Okay.
So imagine for a second that someone's looking for a new job and they don't want their current employer to find out, and they're currently working. How do you think they can go about conducting or even launching the search without their employer finding out?
Yeah. So that it happens to a lot of people. Okay. And we know that the best time to look for a job is when you have a job. You have a lot more leverage, right? And companies can't necessarily take advantage of you the way they might, in some cases, take advantage of somebody who actually is unemployed. But, you do want to be able to connect with people, and you can do that without your employer knowing. And you can do this all on LinkedIn so easily. Not a problem. But don't upload your resume, okay, into the featured section of your LinkedIn profile, okay? But my suggestion is do these searches to find the people with the titles in the kinds of companies that are of interest to you, and then find somebody in your network, if you can, who can make an introduction into those folks, just to have an exploratory conversation, if nothing else. This way, it's all being done outside of your company. There's no reason to do things that draw unnecessary attention to yourself. But we do know you've got to draw attention to your background, because search engine optimization draws a lot of the traffic into your profile. So there's nothing wrong with, elaborating on the jobs that you've had historically. There's nothing wrong with using the 100 character limit that you're entitled to on every one of your job titles in your LinkedIn profile. I don't think those things will draw a red flag with your employer, but it is important, that you don't do something drastic, or don't connect with people that are, or be reaching out to folks that you think might have a relationship with folks inside your company. So you need to even look at the connections of people that you're connected to ensure that you alleviate yourself from them potentially coming into somebody inside your company and saying, hey, you won't believe the email I just got.
And I'll also remind you folks, before you do all that stuff on LinkedIn, go to your privacy settings. And since you're probably connected with people at your current employer, turn off the notifications of a change to your profile, because that's one of the signals that people perceive as being an indicator that you're looking for another job. Yeah. So make sure you turn off the notifications under the privacy settings, which exists under that picture and the ribbon on the top of your profile, on the top of your page.
All right, here's a long question, Jeff. So I'm gonna take a little time reading through it. Okay.
And you're gonna give it to me first.
I'm gonna give it to you, and then we'll figure out how best to address it. I am in the event industry, okay, which we know has been very hard hit. And since it was shut down, I have not had much opportunity to contract for contract positions, as I'm a freelance. Okay, so I feel like, so in interviews, I feel like I lack the experience they want. Sometimes they ask me in the interview, what kinds of things can I mention and discuss to pull out my skills and abilities that they're looking for, even if I have not worked full time in a project for a while. Okay, so the individuals has clearly been a freelancer. They haven't had freelance work in some time. During interviews, how do they start to bridge that potential gap that might present a challenge?
One of the great things about COVID is that it really does, I don't want to say give you a pass, but it gives you an explanation that everyone understands. And thus, if you use a phrase like, I'm sure you realize that there's been a lot less activity in events since March of 2020. And it's only now returning to a degree of normalcy. We're not even anywhere near what we were prior to lockdown, but it is what it is. And I've done some work during this period of time, but certainly not as much as I did previously. I know someone I worked with not long ago was in the activation space and, of course, got obliterated during COVID. So the long and the short of it is, it's not just what you say that matters. It's how you say it that conveys the sincerity that allows them to trust you. Because that's really what they want to do, is they want to trust that this guy, this woman who's talking to them isn't throwing smoke at them. And they want to trust someone and believe you. And thus, if you slow your speech down from what it normally is, as I've tried to illustrate here with my cadence, and speak in just a slightly softer voice, with pauses at the end of phrases that convey sincerity, what you're able to do is foster trust and believability. And when they ask you tough questions, why, there's been some work. True, there has been some work, highly competitive. I haven't won it. And I don't want to work for minimum wage salaries, minimum wage. And that's what I saw if I was willing to travel 500 miles for the work, which I'm unwilling to do. So again, it's the sincerity with which you convey the events that makes all the difference in the world here. Because we can't create a fiction. I know that's not what you want to do. You just want to get to work. So if they can trust you, they'll give you a shot. Not everyone, but more firms than you believe right now.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Here's a question about applicant tracking systems. How do we defeat the applicant tracking system? Okay, so I actually do an hour and a half webinar, and it's recorded up on the website. But I'll just give you a couple pieces of advice here, because you need to have two versions of your resume. One is the one that you attach to your email, and that's your nice looking resume. But you need to have a separate one for uploading to job sites, Indeed, LinkedIn, whoever it might be, where they do not allow you to upload a PDF. And for that, you're going to have a Word version of your resume that will be applicant tracking system compliant. And just a couple simple things, okay? And there's over 30 different ATSs in the marketplace today. No two are exactly alike. And there will be people out there that tell you, you know what, you don't need to have a separate version. But the problem is they've all been programmed differently. You don't know which one you're applying to. So my general feeling is I would make your separate applicant tracking system resume compliant to what you think even the most stringent of systems will require. And that means things like no color, no underlining, no italics, no graphics, no Excel, spreadsheet embedded in there. You got to stay away from stuff. Just think of it as if this was a rich text Word file in many regards, because any one of these things, and I've got about 25 of them, could potentially render your document unreadable. They might see your name, your city and state, and they get to your email address. And if it has a hyperlink, there are still some applicant tracking systems out there that may not be able to read a hyperlink, at which point the software goes, can't read on, give me the next resume. And this is why a lot of job seekers, tell me, I've applied to 15 jobs in the last 10 days, and I haven't heard from one of these companies. And sometimes it may be because of the version of their resume that they've uploaded.
Here's my spin on it, which always starts off with never, ever apply for a job through the applicant tracking system. It's called the black hole for a reason. So once you've made that commitment, you're doing it the harder way. The better way is through networking, of course, and leverage relationships within an organization. Now, if you're determined to apply, well, here's a couple of my pointers, and it's a fun one, but I make the cover letter, because you've probably seen a job ad, I make the cover letter page 1. And I do that because I want to keyword stuff the cover letter, page 1 of the new resume, with terms from the job description or from the job ad. I do that. I'm uploading my resume to you for the position of such and such that I saw advertised on fill in the blank. Let me show you how my resume matches up. Now, flush left are terms out of the job description. Flush right, how long and how recently you've done it. So what you're doing is making page 1 their terminology that demonstrates to the system, she's got the background. And you've done it early enough, and then later on in the resume, you're going to have much the same language, so it's seeing it multiple times. Applicant tracking systems like recency, and by making it early on page 1, the cover letter, it interprets this as recency and then gets confirmation from later on. So it's a fun approach to doing it, and it does help people cut the line on the applicant tracking system. One of my interviews not long ago was with someone who designed the matching systems or the algorithms for one of the systems. And as we were talking, it was just so much fun to listen to him talk about it's really not that hard to crack the code. Just most people don't take the time to switch the language that's in their resume to the language that's in the job description. They assume that there's a data dictionary behind it that does the translation. Most of the time, no one has the time to create that data dictionary.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I'll just add one thing, because keyword matching obviously is a big piece of this ATS cracking. But do not spend hours on end going to a site like JobScan and trying to take your score from 60 to 65. That will be a complete waste of your time. If you want to do it once and get a benchmark, fine. But the best way to keyword match is by looking at the job description, highlighting what you think are the most important skills and requirements of the job, and make sure you've got them appearing both in your resume, in your LinkedIn profile, and move forward from there. All right, so here's a question that I'm going to put out here. I've been out of work since 2020. What is the best way to explain this gap in my resume and cover letter? During this time off, I have taken courses to keep my skills fresh, which is a good thing, right? Any thoughts on that, Jeff? Because we have covered this a little bit. Yeah,
it's hard. And the simplest thing I can suggest is connecting with people who know, like, trust, and respect you, and who might be willing to give you a chance. Because if you're just going to apply, there are people who are going to have greater recency in their experience, and it's going to be hard to get past them. So this is really a role for your network to help you. And thus, maybe it's approaching a previous employer and seeing if they'll take you back. Maybe it's approaching a former manager. And right now, as we're recording this in August, firms are finalizing their budget if they're on a calendar year basis. Someone might be willing to write you into the budget, even as a consultant. So try and find some way, whether it's as a temp, through a temp agency, as a consultant, as an employee, but it's important to get to work as quickly as possible, because as I started this, the music is slowing down on the professional marketplace. And those people who don't have seats pretty soon are going to be out of luck.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's a chatted comment. I'm probably an anomaly. Most of my interviews have been from applying through the ATS and easy apply one click.
Mhm.
I think my response there is don't empower the ATS. And I think Jeff is saying the same thing. They shouldn't even get a vote. And I've coached so many people that have been rejected by an applicant tracking system within 15 or 20 minutes. And we've still been able to get them interviews because we're going around the ATS. And that's not to say don't apply, but the more important thing is how do you get to the right people in this company? You can find them all on LinkedIn. It's so easy to find, in many cases, the hiring manager or at least somebody senior in that department where you found a job or you want to be. And so you can get rejected by an ATS, but that's not game over. Game beginning is when you start to find people that are inside that company and you start to either get introductions into them through your network or you go directly to them if you don't have a connection in there. And this is where you have a great, cover letter that connects the dots between your achievements and the key requirements of that job. And you start to open up the door much bigger than a resume or LinkedIn profile can, in many cases, do on their own. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, think of LinkedIn as an org chart. You have org charts into organizations. Work the org chart. When I did recruiting, if you submitted a resume to HR, that was called the front door. We tried to use the back door, and then a fun term that I heard recently, using the example of a nightclub. There's the bouncer at the front. There's the back door as well, but there's a side door in. And one of the things to always figure out is where's the side door into the organization. So you're not necessarily going back door, you're going in through the side. There's a fun Steven Spielberg story about this, where Spielberg got his start in the movie industry as a teenager, and he rode the tour bus into Universal. And he hopped the bus. He hopped off the bus one day, and he started to work in one of the labs and started to work on his film, which was called Amblin, Amblin. It's on YouTube if you ever want to watch it. And one day he got discovered, and he was coming back daily dressed in his father's suit, carrying a briefcase and hopping off and going to work. And it's the way he got in. Eventually, someone watched the film, was so moved by it, he got the president of Universal to sign him to his first contract. And if you ever look at Spielberg's movies, that's the name of his company, is Amblin. Representing that first opportunity where he created a way that he could get what he wanted, not seeking permission. So always think of a different way to get yourself in.
Yeah. And that's great advice because, one of the things that I talk with a lot of job seekers about is that you've got to take some unorthodox approaches to your job search. You got to be willing to be bold and take chances. It's really easy to sit behind your computer all day long answering online stuff. But what really makes activity happen is you going directly to people who can either make connectivity into the companies or just going into those companies directly yourself if you have no other way in, because a lot of folks don't do this. And it's a way to stand out, particularly if you have a really strong email cover letter.
Agreed.
So
More
with
questions?
that in mind, Jeff, any closing thoughts you want to share with the group before we begin to close things out here?
The skills needed to find a job are different, but complement those needed to do a job. Most of you can do the jobs that you're hired for, but the finding the job part is a different skill set than we're all trained for. And thus, working with someone like Marty, working with someone like me, affords you a way of working with someone who's experienced, who can help you. You don't have to figure this out on your own. Working with an experienced veteran coach can make all the difference in the world and really streamline the process for you.
Which leads us on to The ball is in your court, everybody, okay, because you control 95% of the job search. You can't control the issues associated with COVID, but virtually everything else you can impact. So if you haven't yet joined NSCNG, I encourage you to do so. Join our LinkedIn group. If you're not connected with Jeff and I urge you to do that as well, because we both have a great number of LinkedIn connections that will give you more visibility. Check out all the video recordings that are out there. And if by any chance you feel you need some, coaching assistance, both Jeff and I, we both do complimentary coaching calls to see how we can help you and explore ways in which we can help you, most importantly, shorten your job search.